This video is brought to you by Patreon. By signing up on the Phat Pack Magic Patreon, you get early access to all content, as well as grab bags of valuable cards and amazing mats exclusive to patrons. You can help keep coverage for Paper Magic alive by showing your support on the Phat Pack Magic Patreon today. Hello guys, and welcome back to Phat Pack Magic. Today we are in round 2 of the Darkside FNM Pioneer event, and we've got my good friend Abe Pfeffer playing Golgari Gitrog against Edward Santiago playing Golgari Scales. It's the green-black mirror match of different archetypes, so let's see how they play out. Now, Abe's deck is a little bit of a homebrew, but Edward's is something you're probably familiar with if you're playing on the metagame circuit. Basically, it's Hardened Scales, it makes out really big creatures, and it makes a lot of +1/+1 counters. Edward's going to start off with a land and pass, and looks like Abe is just going to dust off the mat a little bit, give it a little bit of a cleaning, and play an Evolving Wilds before passing the turn back to Ed. Now, Ed looks like he's got a decent start here. There's the Winding Constrictor, there's a Hardened Scales that he just drew for the turn, and his deck can get out there really fast, but it looks like he's got a Steel Overseer queued up, and that's going to be his play for the turn, getting all of his artifact creatures ready as Abe starts shuffling and looking through with an Evolving Wild, depending on what land he's going to pick. It's a forest, which is very respectable. I mean, it's a foil Zendikar forest, which is exceedingly respectable. Now Abe's going to start off his turn here. And the unfortunate thing is with Golgari Gitrog, it doesn't look like it has a lot of interaction. It's mainly building up his land base, as shown with this Llanowar Scout, which acts as a sort of ramp and a decent blocker with a 1/3 body for 2 mana. Looks like Ed has found an Experiment 1, but first he's going to play out that Hardened Scales. He's going to start making his creatures a little bit bigger, and Experiment 1 with the Evolve trigger, meaning that every time a creature with greater power than him enters play, he's going to get a +1/+1 counter, and it's going to be 2 with that Hardened Scales in play. Abe found a land, it's turn 3 land, and here comes Courser of Kruphix, one of the key spells from Old Theros, and it's a card. Wait, what? Looks like Abe is playing out a second land for the turn, or maybe he used the Llanowar Scout to put another land in play already? I guess that. Wait, what? So, Abe is gaining another life. He's going up to 22, but it seems like there's a little bit of miscommunication on how many lands he played this turn. Because Courser doesn't allow you to play an additional land. Oracle of Moldiah does that. I know because Oracle is in my cube. And so is Courser of Kruphix. And if you like cube stuff, you should check out some of the vintage cube I've got going on. So Edward has found a very interesting card, and that is Walking Ballista. And with Steel Overseer able to put a lot of counters on it, Walking Ballista is just going to be able to pump out and just start pinging away at all of Abe's creatures. It seems that is going to be the play for turn. Unfortunately, Ed seems to be missing a land drop. So Walking Ballista is going to come into play, getting 1 counter. Hardened Scale is going to up that to 2, and it's going to trigger the Experiment 1, which is going to put 2 counters on that, and then Steel Overseer is going to add 2 more counters to that Walking Ballista, as Walking Ballista snipes off that Llanowar Scout, and Edward passes the turn back to Abe. Passing the turn back to Abe. Abe draws for turn. It's a Fabled Passage, as we know, because Courser of Kruphix is revealed in the top card of the library. Which means that Ed is going to be playing with almost perfect information as to what Abe has in hand. But I don't think Abe's deck really cares. Both of these decks seem to be kind of like a Voltron style of deck rather than just straight interaction. Abe plays out a Tireless Tracker, and here's a Fabled Passage, gaining him a life, and he's going to start putting clue tokens in. And with those fetch lands, that means that Tireless Tracker is going to get a lot of ammunition, and that Courser of Crewfix is going to be gaining a lot of life. However, I think one thing Abe has to be worried about is the Walking Ballista, which is it's going to be gaining a lot of counters, and Edward has another Walking Ballista in hand. Abe reveals the top, there's another Evolving Wells. Not something you really want to see with Courser after you've played your land for turn. And Abe, it looks like he's got a Raminap Excavator and a, Crucible of Worlds, which is significantly more difficult to deal with than shooting it with a Walking Ballista. Than shooting the Raminap Excavator with a Walking Ballista, that is. And Edward seems locked on mana as well, drawing a Vraska Golgari Queen, but unable to cast it. And here comes a Winding Constrictor, which is going to up the counter count to +2. And Steel Overseer is gonna get 3 counters for himself, and then Walking Ballista is gonna get 3 counters, making it into a 4/4. And within shooting range to kill off that Tireless Tracker, only losing 2 counters in the exchange, meaning that Edward is going to be able to reuse that Walking Ballista over and over again, and all that card advantage just being able to shoot away Abe's threats. Now here's an interesting card and the namesake of Abe's deck. It's the Gitrog Monster, lying conveniently at the top of Abe's library. Abe hasn't played his land for the turn, but he might be able to kind of figure out and finagle a way into getting that Gitrog Monster into his hand and casting it this turn. Abe tapping 3, maybe? I mean, this deck seems pretty interesting to pilot and pretty difficult to do so as well, and to do it correctly, because there seems to be a lot of decision trees. However, Abe is able to play that Fabled Passage from the yard, gaining life. He goes up to 25, thanks to Crucible of Worlds being able to reuse those lands over and over and over again. And here comes land untapped, because Abe has significantly more than 4 lands in play. That Courser of Crewfix doing double duty as a efficient blocker and as a ability to gain him some life and keep him out of easy sniping range from a very fat ballista. So here's the Gitrog Monster, and every turn you have to sacrifice a land, but whenever a land goes to the graveyard, you draw a card, and you're able to play an additional land on each of your turns, meaning that Crucible of Worlds is going to get double duty as Fabled Passage comes back in, gaining Abe another life, putting him up to 26. And being a 6/6 body means that it's going to be a little bit difficult for Edward to deal with, especially since he's locked on lands. Edward is going to regenerate the Experiment 1, removing the 2 counters. And I'm not sure about the play, but I guess it's just to put more counters on it later. So Ed has found a 3rd land, and this is a little concerning because Abe is at 8 lands. So here comes 2 mana, and it's a Hangerback Walker. That's going to come in with 3 counters, and that's going to put 3 counters on the Experiment 1, making it a 4/4. And it seems like that Steel Overseer is also going to affect the amount of counters on that Hangerback Walker, making it a very dangerous threat, because all of Abe's creatures are on the ground, and while there's a complete stalemate going on, Ed might be able to get through with those Flying Thopters. So Ed's going to end his turn, and at end of turn, Abe is going to fetch, gaining a life, but it looks like he missed the draw trigger off the Gitrog Monster, which you're supposed to do before you fetch, I believe. So Abe begins his turn having missed a draw trigger, and I don't think it could be super critical because he's gonna find it this time. Sacrificing a land to the Gitrog Monster, draws him a card, and reveals a land on top, and that's gonna be his land for. That's gonna be his draw for the turn. And there is Nissa, who shakes the world, and she has something to say about all this mana that Abe has amassed. A Fatal Push is gonna push at that Walking Ballista. However, Steel Overseer is going to activate in response, becoming a gigantic creature, like supremely huge. And it's going to put up to 5 counters on that Walking Ballista. Now the question is what Edward is planning on doing with those 5 counters. He could probably kill off that Courser of Crufix and force Abe to not have a lot of life gain. I mean, he's still facing down a bunch of power and toughness from Edward's side of the field in the form of Experiment 1 and the Hangerback Walker, which will be a really bad trade. But Edward seems to be doing 5 damage to the Gitrog Monster, and Abe says, I'm okay with that. That resolves. Seems that Edward thought it was a 5/5 for 5 mana, not a 6/6 for 5 mana. Or he could just be trying to prevent Abe from attacking with the Gitrog Monster, but I think it was honestly a misplay more than anything else. We'll get confirmation on that here in a little bit. Abe is going to draw a card off that clue token and pull that Nissa into his hand. And she's pretty good. I think this is a really good creature, Planeswalker. And again, showing that power with Crucible Worlds, Courser of Crufix, and Gitrog Monster. Abe sacks the Fatal Passage, remembering to draw this time before he shuffles. And that's going to put him up to 5 lands, which is pretty important if he wants to play out that Nissa this turn, which I think is fine. I don't think that Edward has a lot of aggression on the board that Abe can't maybe get through. I think he can probably play out the Nissa, activate it, put up a chump blocker for a 3/3 that can get in the way of the Hangerback Walker, and then Gitrog Monster can sack it or get in the way of the Experiment 1, and Courser could just chump block into the Steel Overseer if Edward really wants to go all out. But it seems like Abe's going to hold back the Nissa in favor of a Courser of Crufix. Now he has Nykthos on board, so 3 mana easily turns into 5. He passes the turn back, and he could just be wanting to get more value off those life gains, and at end of turn, Edward is going to remove 2 counters to regenerate the Experiment 1 again. That is a really interesting play that I've not really seen a lot of in the Hardened Scales build, but it seems to be working because it doesn't really do much against the Experiment 1. Sure, you want to be able to use it in response, but Abe's deck has proved that it's not really caring about creature interaction as much as it just wants to get in there and battle. Edward deciding on whether or not he wants to pump out another Walking Ballista. This time it will get up to 3 counters just on its own, and then Steel Overseer will be able to add 3 more counters onto it if he really wants to get rid of that Gitrog Monster. So here comes Walking Ballista coming down, adding 3 counters, pumping up that really nifty Experiment 1 that hasn't really been doing much except sitting on the sidelines. Steel Overseer pumping the Ballista. And, oh yeah, Hangerback Walker is just a 9/9 right now. It's not a big deal. It's a freaking 9/9. So Ballista blows up the Gitrog Monster, sacrificing itself to do so, because he doesn't want to let Abe get any more card advantage. And the Hangerback Walker comes crashing in, and Abe says, that's fine, that's okay, I can take 9, I'm only at 19. And he's got 2 coursers, a Crucible of Worlds with the Fabled Passage in the graveyard. And he's just going to be able to gain at least 4 life a turn, at the very least. And looks like a Tireless Tracker is going to come back in. No fear from Abe. He does not see another Walking Ballista in his future. Edward is hanging on to a Vraska, but the Vraska might not be able to come down in time with all these threats that Abe's putting out. And on top of that, what do you get rid of? Do you get rid of the Crucible? Do you get rid of the Coursers that are gaining Abe a ton of life? Or do you get rid of that Tireless Tracker that's drawing Abe cards? And Abe just used a clue token to draw that Fatal Push. So it might be time to get rid of that Steel Overseer before that Hangerback Walker can get a little bit bigger. So Abe cracking the Fabled Passage, putting another land into play, and triggering 2 Coursers, gaining 2 life, and then putting a clue token into play. And I can see why this deck would be really hard to pilot, because you've got so many triggers just off doing something as simple as playing a land. That's gotta be mind-racking. Oh, and yeah, he's got to play with the top of his card library revealed, and he's got to be really on top of that, especially when he's casting spells, because Edward, based off what Courser or Prefix does, is entitled to that information. So Abe cheats out a Nissa using Nykthos, adding 5 green to his mana pool. He plays out Nissa, and she is going to be able to start doing some crazy stuff on the next turn. Being able to double all of Abe's green forest mana. While everything's a swamp as well because of that Herborg. And now, here comes Nissa plussing up, putting 3 counters on a land. And it's going to act as a blocker against, looks like that Hangerback Walker. And he does have profitable blocks against maybe Winding Constrictor, and maybe even that Experiment 1 he can chump block or maybe just let through, because this is at 6. So Edward starts on his turn. There's the 4th land he's looking for. And now he's in a tough decision with that Vraska. He could play out the other Hangerback Walker and get 4 counters on it. I think what he really needs to do is start getting in with that flying team against Abe and just really start punishing Abe's ground forces and trying to get an advantage that way. But Edward's going to play out another Hangerback Walker, going up to 4 counters on it. With that Winding Constrictor and Hardened Scales. And every activation of the Hangerback Walker is going to put 3 counters on it, excuse me. So Edward swings in with his Hangerback. It's going at Nissa. He needs to really punish Abe for playing at a Nissa and start getting the pressure going, because as his deck slows down, Abe is just speeding up. Abe chump blocks a land, taps 2 mana for it, draws a card off that clue token, and the land goes to the graveyard. Now, the card he drew is Sylvan Advocate. That's a really interesting card. It's a 2/3 for 2, and when you have over 5 lands in play, over 6 lands in play, then it gets +2/+2, and all of your creature lands gets +2/+2. So Nissa activations creates 5/5 creature lands with Vigilance and Haste with that Sylvan Advocate in play. And the top card of Abe's library is another really interesting card. It is Find and Finality, a really powerful card in the previous standard season when you could go Golgari, just card advantage, using Jadelight Rangers to mill your graveyard and find one of those cards that could be really punishing to the control decks. So Abe doing his thing with the Fabled Passage, gaining life, drawing cards with the clue token, making more clue tokens. Abe is just, it looks like Abe is at that level where where you're watching the commander player just start to go off, and you're sitting there like, well, I'm ready to die. I'm fine with that. You know, if you want to kill me, that'd be great. But it looks like Abe is being very careful. He doesn't want to crash into one of those hangerback walkers and create a problem of a bunch of Thopters. The land comes into play, gaining Abe a little bit more life, putting him up to 27. And this is after going down to 19 a couple of turns ago. And he also has a Nissa and a Crucible Worlds and 2 Coursers with Crufix. I think it's about time that Abe needs to start figuring out a way to win. I think we're at that point. So Abe counting up the amount of mana that he would get off of Nykthos, and it is 7 mana. So he turns 3 into 7, and it looks like he's tapping a forest as well. So getting a total of 8 mana in his pool. What is he gonna find with it? Yeah, well, there we go. He's going to use Find, and he's gonna put 2 creatures back into his hand. And it's a Gitrog Monster and the Tireless Tracker that had died off a few turns ago due to a Walking Ballista. And just look at the amount of cards that Abe has in his hand. Here comes Gitrog Monster, allowing him to play more lands. And here comes the Tireless Tracker. And he's almost got too many cards in hand. He plays his land for the turn, triggering the Tireless Tracker, triggering the Coursers, making a clue token. Alright, Abe, I'm ready. I'm ready for you to win. I don't think that Ed has much recourse here in this situation, because he's only got 2 cards in hand. And this is finally going to tick up, and she's going to untap Nykthos. And I guess he wants to use another charge of Nykthos to just completely unload his hand. Here comes Nykthos, adding 5, 6, 7, 8 mana to his pool. And I think it might just be that Ed is saying okay to this rather than just scooping, because he wants to see what Abe's deck can do. Like, he wants to see it win. So with all that mana, he plays out another Tireless Tracker and then that Sylvan Advocate. And that's a 4/5 creature, and now that Nykthos is a 5/5. Now the question is, how does Abe win? What's his win condition? Oh, and here's Nissa, Vastwood Seer, just because I don't want to, discard any more cards. And Abe is actually out of basic lands. And here's the crazy thing. I asked Abe about getting the deck list for this deck because I think it's a really interesting deck, and I think it'd be fun to, to see, well, for you guys to see how it works and see the list and everything. But I'm pretty sure through this game, you can put together this entire list, because it looks like we've gone through his entire deck. Here's Wayward Sawtooth, which we hadn't seen before. So I guess there's 4 of these in his deck as well. I mean, look at the size discrepancy between Abe's library and Ed's. Oh, and Wayward Sawtooth allows for Abe to play another land. And there's a Fabled Passage, which isn't going to find anything, but it gains Abe 2 life, and it's going to put another clue token into play. I mean, again, well, no, it's going to put 2 clue tokens into play and gain him 2 life. And if he sacks the Fabled Passage, it's going to allow him to draw a card off the Gitrog Monster. And this is all 1 turn, by the way. This has all been 1 turn, and it's almost been like 5 minutes of Abe just comboing out with his deck before he finally passes the turn back. And it looks like, I think I'm ready to give you lethal here. And Ed draws a Nissa of his own, and it's the one that puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So with Winding Constrictor, it would put 3 counters on everything. But it looks like Vraska is going to be the play for the turn. And unfortunately, he doesn't have another land Otherwise, he could really pump up one of his hangerback walkers. He's counting up the amount of creatures that Abe has and trying to decide on whether or not he can race. He's going to sacrifice the 4 counter hangerback walker and put 4 Thopters into play. And it'll block. I mean, it's going to be really tough for Edward to come back from this situation. He really needed to start punishing Abe with those flying Thopters on the big hangerback walker a few turns ago. But sometimes, you know, when you're in a board state like this, you tend to want to get maximum value out of every play because you're not sure when they're going to be able to alpha strike or not. Abe draws for turn. It's another Sylvan Advocate. No, he's not drawing for turn. He's drawing off of a blue token. Excuse me. And it's still end of turn. He's going to sacrifice the Fabled Passage. Looks like to fail to find. So the question is whether or not he's going to remember to draw off of the Fabled Passage trigger. Well, the Fabled Passage going to the graveyard with the Gitrog Monster. And it doesn't look like it. And again, I don't blame Abe because there are so many triggers going off of just a land coming into play. You know, Abe has found a fatal push on the top of his library, and on his upkeep he needs to sacrifice a land, which doesn't seem to be a big deal. So he's going to sacrifice a forest, adding 2 mana, drawing off the Gitrog, and then he's going to reveal the top, clue token, draw off that, put more counters on these tireless trackers, another fatal push, and that's going to be his draw for the turn, and another Nissa. Abe is dangerously close to just completely running out of cards on his library. You know, you don't really associate card draw with green, but Abe has found a way to really make it work. Here's his land for the turn, gaining 2 life, putting another 2 clue tokens. I mean, holy Christ. Abe has the City's Blessing, but I think there should be like maybe 2 or 3 of them in there. He is very blessed. He is incredibly blessed at this point in time. And he's got like almost like, what, 10 cards in hand? Oh, and another land for turn because he's got Gitrog Monster and Wayward Sawtooth. He can just play lands all day, every day. Thing is, he needs to figure out a way to chew through all these Thopters because Edward could just have the game plan of chump blocking ad nauseum until Abe runs out of cards. And Abe seems to be helping Edward along with this game plan by simply drawing a ton of cards with those clue tokens. There's another card. What could Abe be digging for at this point? Oh, and there's the land for turn because Corsair Crewfix allows it to play land off the top of the library. There's another 2 clue tokens. What does Abe want? And he's got close to infinite mana, adding, Jesus Christ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 mana with Nykthos. Alright, you got 12 mana, Abe. In addition to all the mana that he's got just off of his lands. So it looks like he's using 2 to crack another clue token. He's gonna feel really bad if he can't get in there with lethal on this turn, and Ed is able to kind of find a way to kill off both those tireless trackers. Here's another clue token. He's got a Gitrog Monster. Alright. There's another 2 counters on each of the tireless trackers. Abe might be in risk of not just running out of cards, but running out of dice as well. And here come another clue token, revealing the top. He's got almost every card in his deck. Oh, I guess that could be what he's digging for, is that find finality. He could be trying to he could try and kill off the Hangerback Walker with his Fatal Push, and then use the find finality to kill off all the Thopters, and then crash in for a lethal. I mean, yeah, sure, I guess that can work. But here comes another clue token. I mean, those Tireless Trackers are up to 12, almost 16, 19 power each, and -4, that feels like lethal. I mean, at this point, it kind of feels like Abe is just showing off. It kind of feels, he could have killed Ed in a whole bevy of ways, but he's just really enjoying playing out this deck. And Ed might be getting to the point where he's just bored. Alright, here's a Fatal Push. It looks like Abe is finally going for lethal now. The Fatal Push is going to hit that Hangerback Walker. And Abe has that find finality. Edward says, oh, okay, alright, yeah, you got it. You got the win. And wow, what a... I mean, that game was almost 30 minutes long. These guys are going to have to really push if they're going to try and not to hit time at the end of this match. So we are going to take a small fast forward. If you want, pause the video here and take a stretch, kind of get your legs out there. I'm going to do the same before coming back and doing game 2. And here we are on to game 2. I hope you guys got some popcorn or something to drink, because I don't know, this seems to be like a really long drawn out match. And I think from Ed, he's going to really want to play out an aggressive hand. Yeah, it's fun to set up your team and get all these counters and be really tricksy and everything. But against Abe, all that time just means more life with Courser of Krufix and more opportunities for him to start getting card advantage and put out blockers that Ed just simply can't get through. So here's a great start. A Hardened Scales on turn 1 for Ed, and Abe fishing out with a Evolving Wilds on his own turn. It's like you're grabbed a force but face down. I mean, I guess Abe I don't know the reasoning behind that one. I mean, Edward is privy to that information of what land Abe would get. I don't think it would really make a lot of difference in his decision making. But here's another Hardened Scales and a little bit of pain from a Llanowar Waste. And here comes Experiment 1, and that can get pretty big pretty fast. Now the question is, does Edward have something to really buff the power and toughness? Because right now it's just a 1-1, and he's got another Experiment 1 in hand. Abe sends out a Sylvan Advocate, a 2-3, which, I mean, he can get up there in a little bit. But right now, wow, another Hardened Scales and another Experiment 1 from Ed, taking another life, going down to 18. But he's got 3 Hardened Scales and 2 Experiment 1s. Sounds like a full house to me. Does Ed win, or does Abe have like something that beats a full house? I don't play a lot of poker, so maybe Abe can tell me on this one. Abe plays out a Wayward Sawtooth, which is going to allow him to play another land, and he's really got to get to that City's Blessing, because it looks like Ed has a Pelt Collector and something else in hand. Question is, does that something else in hand equal 2 power? So here's a Blooming Marsh, and Ed deciding on what color to tap for this Pelt Collector that he's got queued up. Oh wow, he's gonna take 1 pain, and it looks like he has a Winding Constrictor in hand. So here comes Pelt Collector, here comes Winding Constrictor, and that is going to have a bevy of abilities, triggering the Pelt Collector and both of the Experiment 1s. And it looks like he's putting 4 counters on each, but I'm not sure, I might have to get a rules judge on here, but I feel like it should be 5, because the Winding Constrictor would be in play when those triggers go on the stack. so it should give another counter on those triggers. But Edward's still crashing in for 10 damage and bringing Abe down to 10. And Abe has a Courser of Krufix in hand, so he may not want to pop that Fabled Passage just yet. Maybe hoping to draw a dual land, or there's an Ulamog, but it's not a forest. So luckily Abe has 4 lands with that Fabled Passage, so it's going to grab that forest and play untapped. But he really needs a lot of help here. So here comes Courser of Krufix, and there's a Fabled Passage on top, which is really crucial here. There's his land for turn. He's going to gain 1 life, going to 11. I think what he really needs is a way to get 2 more permanents into play to trigger the City's Blessing and allow that Wayward Sawtooth to act as a blocker. But he doesn't have another land in hand. Or maybe he missed the fact that he could crack that Fabled Passage and maybe hope for another land on top and play that Ramen Up Excavator. And that would put him at 9 still, but it would be another blocker. And Abe is facing down 15 points of damage here. 17 if Ed wants to get frisky and sending that Winding Constrictor as well. Here comes Abe cracking that Fabled Passage. That's going to net him another life, bringing him up to 12. And he'll only have to chump block 1 creature. He'll go down to 2. But Abe's deck is no stranger at gaining life, as we've seen before in the previous game, being able to go from 19 to almost 40 at the end of the game. So there's a Nykthos on top, and Abe is doing the math, because he doesn't want to give up that Courser. The life gain is too valuable. The Sylvan Advocate is going to block there, I guess. It's going to block the external one. It's 10 damage either way. Abe is going to go down to 2 life. And he's really got to make this next turn work. He's down another permanent, so that Wayward Sawtooth is going to be a little bit further away from the City's Blessing. And it looks like Edward has another follow-up. It's another Winding Constrictor. Wow. Edward needs to go to the we're in Vegas, so Edward needs to hit up the casino because he is drawing spades. Well, I guess full house, flush. Edward is having really consistent draws with this deck, is what I'm saying. So here's 3 mana. There's a Courser of Krufix. That puts his permanent count up to 8. That puts it up to 9, gaining him 2 life. Needs 1 more permanent, and then that Wayward Sawtooth can start getting in the way of other things. But you know what sounds really good with those Coursers of Krufix? I think that Ramen Up Excavator. Yeah, because then he can play lands from his graveyard, get those Fabled Passages going, start really gaining some more life. Yep, that's the plan. Here's Ramen Up Excavator with Abe getting the City's Blessing. No trigger, it just happens. He's playing the Fabled Passage, gaining 2 life from both Coursers. And there's a marker for his second land for turn. And Fabled Passage going away and fetching out another land and gaining Abe another 2 life. This is going to put him at 8. So that means he can block a couple of things and stabilize at 3 life and only lose the Ramen Up Excavator and the Wayward Sawtooth and maybe trade the Pelt Collector for that Sawtooth. So at end of turn, those 2 experimental ones are going to regenerate, and maybe he'll find something bigger and better to trigger them and make them bigger and fatter. And he does. 2 mana for a Walking Ballista is going to make it a 6/6. And that's going to trigger both of those, all three of those creatures are going to get an additional 6 counters each. So experimental ones are going to be 9/9s. That Pelt Collector is going to be an 11/11. And Abe's math just went out the window. So here's Hardened Scales on the aggro plan, and Abe scoops it up. A much faster game than the previous one, and this game win going to Edward is going to tie it up. And here we are, we're going on to game 3. Alright guys, it's game 3, and the timer is ticking down. They do not have a lot of time left to finish out this match, and it might end in a draw. So Edward probably has to mulligan pretty aggressively to get an opener like he did in game 2, because giving Abe any amount of turn could just prove to be a very bad situation for Ed, because in the previous game, Abe was gaining a ton of life and he had his engine starting up. But here we go, Abe is starting off with an Evolving Wilds, and what does Ed have? Here's a Swamp and Pass. No turn 1 Hardened Scale, that's really not good for Ed. Abe gonna sacrifice the Evolving Wilds at end of turn. Looks like he's pulling out a Forest. And neither deck does a lot of interaction, so they can basically build up their Legos, and the question is who can make their construct first. It feels like Battle Cruiser Magic in a lot of ways. So Abe drops a Mutavault and passes the turn back. It looks like Ed has found a Llanowar Waste, and here's a Steel Overseer. And that could prove to be pretty strong if Ed can get down a Walking Ballista. But here comes one of the most destructive cards against Edward's game plan, and that's a Courser of Kruphix, and it's found another fetch land at the top. So here's another land from Ed, finally being able to play on his land for turn consistently. And there's a Pelt Collector, and looks like a Point of Pain is going to bring Ed down to 19 and bring in a Winding Constrictor, which is going to add 2 counters onto that Pelt Collector and make it a 3/3. Abe draws for turn, revealing an Ulamog at the top of his library. I don't know if that's in his main board or in his sideboard. I figure that probably just in his main board, given that Abe can really ramp out tons of lands and tons of mana. Abe deciding on how he wants to play with this turn. 3 mana and a Raminap Excavator, playing an Evolving Wild from his graveyard, sacking it, gaining a life off that Courser of Kruphix. And it seems like the engine is starting, because Abe is just able to kind of clutch all these cards in hand, and playing all these lands, he doesn't need to really hit many land drops. But on top of his library is another Forest, and at end of turn, Ed is going to add 2 counters onto that Steel Overseer, making himself a pretty big fatty boy. 3/3, respectable 3/3, but more importantly, here comes Walking Ballista, and that is a big boy right there. The question is, does he want to trade the Walking Ballista for that Courser of Kruphix, or does he want to let that Courser have another turn? So here comes the Walking Ballista, getting 2 counters to start with. Steel Overseer, pumping those counters up to 4, and instead of that Courser, he's going to nuke the Raminap Excavator, which is a fine play, I think. It leaves the Walking Ballista still on the table. It's a 1/1, sure, but next turn it's going to be able to start really firing off over and over again. And that repeatable removal might be the death knell that Abe does not want to hear. Looks like an Evolving Wild is going to be the land for turn, gaining Abe another life, and shuffling away the cards that he doesn't want to see. Now at the bottom, we can see Kalidas, and I think that's more of a sideboard card because it doesn't necessarily play along right into Abe's game plan, but I can see it as a fine sideboard card against aggressive decks where he needs that life gain, and all that mana could pump the Kalidas by sacrificing those zombie tokens over and over again. So Fatal Push, rather than hitting the Walking Ballista, is going to knock that Steel Overseer out of the running, and it's going to put another counter on the Pelt Collector because the creature that died had more power and toughness than it. Abe passing the turn back. And Edward hasn't been able to really get any damage in there. He's really kind of stuck behind that Courser of Crucifix, and it's a really thick body. But he's found his fourth land, and it's a Blooming Marsh that's going to come into play tapped. But what he really needs is a way to get through that Courser. The Winding Constrictor comes down, and there's a Stonecoil Serpent, which has protection from multicolor, and it's going to get 3 +1/+1 counters, 1 from coming into play, and then 2 from the Winding Constrictors. And while he's putting the counters on it, that Pelt Collector is going to come crashing in for 4 and bring Abe down to 20. But as quickly as he fell down, he's getting right back up, gaining a life. But here's Find and Finality, with the Finality mode putting 2 counters on the Courser, and it's going to wipe Edward's board. And that could be the game right here. That could be the play that makes this game. Because Ed has put out all of his resources. He's down to 2 cards in hand, and he's got no way to deal with that Courser. The Walking Ballista is going to shoot Abe for 1, bringing him down to 20, but his entire board is now just gone, decimated, and he is left without a presence. However, Abe is going to pass the turn back rather than swinging in for 2. And I'm not sure about that play because Abe really needs to start getting in there. Oh, and he's got to reveal the Gitrog Monster on top of his library. So here's 2 mana. There's a Scavenging Ooze. And it looks like here's a Hangerback Walker, but without all those pump effects, it seems pretty weak in comparison. Abe draws a Gitrog Monster per turn, and is it time for the monster? No, it's 4 mana. Here comes Kalidas, and that might start putting a little bit of a crimp in Edward's plans of getting through with that Scavenging Ooze. So Abe comes crashing in for 4, bringing Ed down to 15. Ed draws your turn, and he seems pretty stuck. But 2 mana, he's found another Winding Constrictor. He's going to take another point. No, he's not going to take point pain. No, he's not having the mana always. He's playing out a Winding Constrictor, and could be useful to start putting more counters on that Hangerback Walker. But right now, if it dies, it's going to be exiled due to the Kalidas. So that seems like one threat that Edward has to deal with before he can start getting much value out of that Hangerback Walker. And on top of that, Abe is just fine right now because he's able to pump out that Gitrog Monster, play a land for turn, gaining another life, and it doesn't seem like he's got much after that. But he's going to start drawing a lot of cards. And if he can find a Crucible or a Ramming Up Excavator to start digging out those Fabled Passages and those Evolving Wilds, he's going to be drawing a lot of cards. And just like in the first game, being able to chew through his library and find every answer. So Edward, at end of turn, is going to lose 2 life, or 1 life, and gain 2 life, going up to 16, exiling the Ramming Up Excavator and one of his own creatures, and putting 4 counters on that Scavenging Ooze. A very respectable 6/6 now, with just a little bit of investment, and now it can start, can't get into the Gitrog Monster, but it can start chewing through some of Abe's team if he gets enough counters on it. Ed playing out Vraska, and it might be time to kill off that. It might be time to kill off that Courser of Krufix. With Abe gaining so much life and getting knowledge off of his library with that Courser, it doesn't matter that Edward's getting the same knowledge. So it looks like Vraska's just going to pump and not sacrifice anything and pass the turn. He can't sacrifice the Hangerback Walker because it'll just get exiled. Abe drawing off the Gitrog Monster, drawing for turn. He's drawn a Nissa, and Nissa is going to be able to flip this turn if he plays it. So here's 3 mana. Down comes Nissa, and she's going to search his library for a basic land. And whenever a land enters the battlefield, if Nissa has 7 or more, then she's going to flip into her Planeswalker mode. But it has been called time, and they are at turn, so this is turn 0. Meaning that Abe needs to get through 17 points of damage, or Edward just needs to survive long enough for turn 5. So here comes a land into play, it's Fabled Passage, and it looks like Abe might start being able to combo off, because there's a Tireless Tracker as well. And sacrificing that Fabled Passage is going to allow him to draw a card. But he's got to remember all these triggers. And it's really difficult to remember all this stuff. So here comes Fabled Passage, sacrifice, trigger. There's Tireless Tracker into Abe's hand. Shuffling through his library, digging to find another land. And Ed is just, he's gotta stay alive. He's not gonna scoop because a draw is better than a loss. So Ed is just kind of sitting there staring like, alright, can you kill me? But there's a Fatal Push on top of Abe's library. He plays a Tireless Tracker and then plays his land for turn. Fatal Passage gets sacked. He's going to draw that Fatal Push with the Gitrog Monster. Start digging through his library. It's going to be another Clue token and another life gained for Abe. I mean, at this point, Abe's life total doesn't really matter that much. It's just how many, how can Abe kill through Ed's defenses. And a Fatal Push is going to kill off that Scavenging Ooze, and in response, Ed is going to gain 1 life, bringing him up to 17. However, that's going to make a zombie token, and then Return to Nature is going to kill off that Hangerback Walker, and it goes to exile, meaning that he doesn't get the Thopter token, and Abe gets another zombie token instead. And this is turn 0. So, and Abe still hasn't activated his Nissa. So in comes the damage. That's 4, 10, 13 damage coming right in at Ed. And a Winding Constrictor is going to get in the way of the Gitrog Monster. And that's going to put Ed down to 7 life. Ed draws for turn. It's a land. Oh man. Ed was not able to get in that early start, and it seems like this might be where he falters. Ed was going to put it in play untapped, but instead he chose not to. He doesn't really see a way through. I don't foresee a way for Ed to get through this board. At least, especially for 2 more turns. But he's going to say, you know what, Nebraska activation. Just a spiteful, kill that tireless tracker. And he passes the turn because that's all he can do. Abe untaps. Plenty of zombie tokens. Turn. And the match win is going to go to Abe. So if you guys want to check out this nutso Gitrog Golgari deck, check out the links in the description below. But that's going to be it for us this time on Phat Pack Magic. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button so you can see when I put out new videos. Also make sure to hit that like button, not just for me, but for my players too. We also got plenty of behind the scenes footage on Instagram, so if you like that kind of stuff, check us out there. And if you like this kind of content and you want to support us, check us out on Patreon. Your support helps make these videos happen, and we've got plenty of awesome stuff on the tiers if you're looking for cool bonuses. We've got unstable basic lands signed by me, and we've got exclusive playmats. So if you like the Mox Jet playmat that was featured on this video, the only place you can get it is on the Phat Pack Magic Patreon. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and may all your packs be fat.